There's like some gray boxes covering the slides.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, all good now.
The Amazing Soul, the Vedic Introduction. The Vedic wisdom tradition offers us a coherent, cogent, and extensive body of knowledge about the soul. One of the defining characteristics of the Vedic wisdom tradition in general, and the Bhagavad Gita in particular, is its clear and analytical treatment of the subject of the soul. It does not treat the soul vaguely as a metaphorical reference to our intangible essence. Rather, it presents the soul concretely as a very real spiritual entity with its own distinctive characteristics.
We sometimes say in the West, I have a soul. But I think from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, it'd be more correct to say, I am the soul and I have a body. The soul is what provides cognition to an awareness to the body. And it's the soul that is the part of us that is aware, that feels.
The amazing soul, consciousness personified. Consciousness does not originate in the brain. Then where does it originate? The Bhagavad Gita explains that it originates from the soul. The Bhagavad Gita 13.34 illustrates the relationship between the soul and consciousness with a vivid example. O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. This verse indicates that just as the sun illuminates the universe, the soul illuminates the body with consciousness. This implies that just as sunlight is the symptom of the sun, consciousness is the symptom of the soul.
The power of the soul extends throughout the entire body. There's a passage in the Katha Upanishad which describes the soul as like the sun. It illuminates a particular area. Sometimes it's described like a lamp or a candle. It provides, the light of a candle will fill up a room in the same way that the illumination of the soul will fill up the body.
If we are inside a room and can't see the sun and the sky outside, we can still infer its presence by observing its symptom, sunlight. Similarly, even though we are not able to see the soul inside the body, we can still infer its presence by observing its symptom, consciousness.
Okay, wonderful. So last week we spoke about, the metaphysics of the soul. Can anyone still remember what's the size of the soul? Anyone? Just unmute yourself.
A fraction of the strand of hair.
Exactly. It is 1/10,000th the tip of the hair. It is so small, right? You actually can't see it with your naked eye, but it is actually providing the entire consciousness to our body. So just a quick recap of what we covered last week. In the spiritual and philosophical context, for example, from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the body, the mind, the soul, the false ego, as well as the intellect, this represents different aspects. Just a minute. This represents different aspects of human consciousness, right? And last week you had a question about, what's the false ego? And I mentioned that essentially the false ego is what is sort of cheating us from believing that we are a spirit soul. And therefore we continuously identify with this material body, right? So the false ego is this entire perception which is provided to us, which gets us to start thinking that, oh, I'm an Indian, I'm a Chinese, I'm a Singaporean, right? Essentially, we are all a spirit soul. right? So let's break this down. The body, straightforward, is the physical structure of a person, the senses, and the actions which we perform. That is classified under body. What about the mind? The mind, as I've mentioned last week, is an entire repository of the thought processes, our emotions, our memories, our perceptions. We have discussed the soul extensively, right? That's the spiritual essence or the core of a person. And the false ego essentially is this self-image constructed by the mind that I'm a Singaporean, I'm a Hindu, I'm a male, etc. Okay, and then the intellect is essentially the capacity for rational thought, analysis, and the logical reasoning within the mind. The intellect is actually the decision-making center of this construct. It is the discerning factor of this construct. It tells you, all right, whether should I engage in this activity or should I not do, right? Should I just watch Netflix or should I attend this session organized by Hui Hui, right? So that's what the intellect does. And therefore, the intellect is essentially the highest order element within this body, right? Next comes the mind, and then finally the body or the senses. Okay, and higher than the intellect, higher than the mind, and higher than the body is actually the soul. Okay, we will go through this in a short while, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse of this concept once again. All right, and therefore there is interconnectedness between these elements which we have just spoken about. And this whole body of bhakti yoga, essentially what it does is it allows us to transcend from these limitations of this false ego. It allows us to transcend from this whole concept that I'm this body, right? I'm a managing director. I'm an Indian gentleman. It just gets us out of this whole concept and gets us deeper into what we are in essence, which is essentially we are a spirit soul. Okay, so this is a wonderful schematic which actually represents the different layers of the self. It starts with the soul. The soul is eternal in nature, as we have explained earlier on. There was never a time when the soul did not exist, and in future too, it does not exist. And essentially what death does is, it is essentially just a transmigration of the soul from one body to another. The body which is selected by material nature will essentially depend on how we have orchestrated our life. Okay, the soul by itself is full of bliss, right? It's so blissful, it's so calm, it's full of happiness. But why is it that we are not able to experience this happiness? Because we are so much into this bodily concept of life. The moment we get into practices of bhakti yoga, into pranayam, into deeper meditation, then you will realize that yes, you see more and more of this bliss. Okay? We spoke about the physical body. Essentially, it's consisting of water, fire, air, earth, and ether, which is essentially the space or the cavity within the body. And then the subtle body, which essentially you can't touch, consists the mind, the false ego, and the intelligence. Okay, so this is 101 on spirituality. Right? It took me many years to actually grasp this. Right? If you were to just read the Bhagavad Gita, somewhere within the purport, somewhere within the verses, this is explained. But I've been really fortunate to be taught by my spiritual masters. And essentially what Hui and I are doing right now is sharing this knowledge which we have learned from the disciplic succession of spiritual masters. Okay. So let me ask all of you a question. Who is controlling our mind? Who do you think is controlling our mind?
Our thoughts.
Wonderful, right? So essentially, it's all the thoughts which are there. It's based on our experiences, etc. Right? It can essentially direct the mind towards doing an activity or not doing an activity. Anyone else? Okay. So can you just identify yourself, the person who just answered the question?
Sure. This is Namita.
Hi, Namita.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, right? So our thoughts, essentially, this is the entire, the mind is just the repository of all our earlier exchanges, and, our thought processes, etc. It's just, the mind is just a repository. And, that's where our reflex action comes in, right? And there are times when we know that we should not engage in a particular activity, but still the mind will tell you, no, Namita, let's just do it. It will give us pleasure. Have you experienced that, Namita?
Yeah, many times. Yeah.
Many times, right? On a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right? So the mind can be our best friend and the mind can be our worst enemy too.
Yeah.
Right? So there has to be a higher order element to control the mind.
Sure.
Right? And that's where the intelligence actually comes in. That discerning factor actually comes in to tell the mind that, look, yes, this particular activity may give me a quick fix, right? It might be a shortcut to happiness. But you know what? In the long run, this is going to be detrimental to me. It might be a quick fix and give me instant happiness, but that happiness will not last, right? It might give me a quick happiness, a bout of, bliss, a bout of pleasure, but then I know this is not sustainable, right? So therefore, that intellect needs to go through a series of practices, thereby strengthening its ability to tell the mind what to do and what not to do. Okay. Now let's look at this further. So there is a hierarchy within our system, right? Of the soul, the intelligence, the mind, and the horses. And this is from the Katha Upanishad, right? It's a wonderful analogy. I've never seen an analogy as powerful as this, frankly. So if you look at this particular chariot, the horses denote our senses, right? So we have the sense of sight, the sense of smell, sense of hearing, sense of touch, and the sense of tasting. Okay, these are the horses. And what will the horses by nature do? They will run in all directions, right? The horses need to be brought under control. These reins, right, essentially is the mind. The mind needs to be able to control the senses. But if the mind is not powerful enough, if the mind is not strong enough, if the mind is not spiritualized, then it will not be able to control these horses. The horses will go in all directions, right? So it's important for the chariot driver. The chariot driver is denoted by, or intelligence is denoted by this chariot driver. The chariot driver must have a solid grasp of the reins. And therefore, the intelligence need to be so spiritualized that it can dictate to the mind what needs to be done and what should not be done. Right? The mind will tell you, let's just go for a quick fix. But the intelligence will tell you, yes, this is the dopamine nation right now. If you read the book Dopamine Nation, this entire paradigm, this entire framework is explained in great detail. Right? About it, it just gives you so many examples about, in today's world, just for the quick fix, just for the dopamine effect, we will not be able to control our mind. So the intelligence needs to be so nicely spiritualized that it can control the mind or the reins, and the reins can then control the horses or our senses. Okay. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the soul, who is the passenger, he will be in a flux. Where are my senses going? And that's because my mind is not able to be controlled, and therefore the mind is not able to control the senses, and I'm not spiritually advanced enough to control my mind. I'll just take a pause here to see if you have any questions, you have any further deliberations on this, or any realizations or reflections. Is this all making sense?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so that's what.
I have a question, sorry.
Sure.
This is a great example and a great analogy, but let's say we need to break it down into our daily life, dealings of daily living. Let's say you're standing in a queue and, somebody just tries to cut a queue and you snap at that person. You realize immediately in a few minutes' time that you shouldn't have reacted the way you reacted. Now, if you have to break down an example like that, of then what were the senses, what did the mind do, what is the higher intellect, and what is the consciousness telling you? So this is a great thing, but then how do we apply it in our day-to-day life?
Wonderful, right? So what has happened is the reflex action actually occurred. Whenever we are triggered, immediately the mind will tell you to do this. And that's because the higher intellect has not been activated. The discerning power has not been activated, right? Sundar Pichai, he says, do you react to a flying cockroach, or do you respond to a flying cockroach? React simply means that, we are allowing the reflex action to take place. But a response is where we take time out to tell ourselves, do I react in a spontaneous manner based on, my mental construct, or do I take time out and tell myself that, no, I will not do this. I know this is spontaneous, but, right, one of my spiritual masters, he has written his PhD, was essentially on the mind and how chanting actually helps. And in one example, he was tasked to counsel a couple, right? And essentially what the husband used to do was, the moment he was triggered by anything which the wife says, he will just explode and cause harm. And when he went through a chain of counseling sessions, he started off by saying that, yeah, but this is, it just spontaneously come. I'm not able to control this. And then my spiritual master asked him this question. In the event that, right, somebody is watching you and, a revolver is on your head, the moment you react, you will be shot. Would you have reacted differently? Essentially, what's happening is you are becoming more conscious of your actions, because if I react in an explosive manner, someone will shoot me. right? It's because we are, just spontaneously behaving without consciously asking ourselves, is this the right thing to do or not? And therefore, the reflex actions immediately take place. But Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin in medicine has done University of Medicine in Wisconsin has done extensive research on this because he was requested by Dalai Lama. And his research proves that the more we get into meditation, right, the more we get into chanting, the more we are deliberate about our spiritual activities, the more we will be actually able to showcase compassion, the more we will become, less reactive, or the more we will, or the less we will become spontaneous in these disruptive actions, right? So there's sufficient research today to prove the concepts which are taught in the Bhagavad Gita, in the scriptures, in the Buddhist teachings, that this whole practice of bhakti yoga, pranayam, chanting, essentially just calms us down to become much, much more compassionate. Essentially, what this whole practice of bhakti yoga, chanting, mindfulness is doing is, our soul has been covered by lifetime and lifetime of dirt, of terrible practices, of crazy impressions, right? The soul is this shiny diamond, but because of how we have been acclimatized in this world, right? Because of the greed going on in the external world, because of lustful activities, because of the conditioning from our past lives, we are actually not able to see this shine emanating from our soul. But the moment we start meditating, the moment we start deliberately and intentionally engaging in spiritual activities, all these layers of mud and dust will slowly, right, in a slow manner, be removed. And essentially, what you will then see is these amazing features of the soul. And one of the features of the soul is, you're spontaneously expressing gratitude. You are spontaneously being compassionate to others. You are just radiating warmth. This whole playfulness, this curiosity is just emanating from you. Right? This is what spirituality does. Okay. As long as we are not intentional about it, then we are getting back to this particular state of consciousness, where we are just going with, the flow. Right? And that's the reason why, if you look at personalities like the Dalai Lama, some of the sages, right, some of this, amazing spiritual personalities, you don't see them getting triggered, right? You don't see them, behaving in crazy manners, etc. Does this answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So once again, this is just 101 of spirituality, right?
Sorry, PK, could I just say
Yes.
something?
Sure.
This is Dil here. So, I mean, the reason why Dalai Lama and everyone else, the sages have not, they're very, very ascended souls. So they really are not dealing with the same level of human difficulties that a lot of us are born with. We have a lot of ancestral, karmic, samskaric.
Yes.
There's all this stuff. And you're right to say that this is 101, that chanting and meditation definitely will help. And then as we progress, there's other ways to kind of clear the dirt. Yeah, but in saying dirt, I also want to, because I'm a huge proponent of shadow work, and I believe that this dirt is also part of us, and that we should also be compassionate to ourselves about if we have it, that it's not like a dirty thing, a bad thing. It's just that we have it, and to integrate it. Because what happens is that because I've been in these bhakti circles and stuff as well, is that we tend to either deny or ignore these parts of us because they have been kind of labeled as bad. And we don't want that. We want to be peaceful, we want to be joyful. But until we really recognize that, hey, as humans, we also have this dualistic aspect where we can be bad. We got to embrace that part, and then we can tell ourselves that, but hey, in this moment, in the queue, I'm making a choice to choose light, and I'm going to respond instead of react, like you shared earlier. And I'm going to basically be one step above my lower self, which can choose to react, but I'm going to respond. And each moment, I'm just going to choose to respond. So you're right to also say that the mind here is very, very powerful. And so I just wanted to add in. Thanks.
Wonderful, DK. Yeah. I think it starts exactly as what you have mentioned. It starts with acknowledging, right? Acknowledging that, look, if I were perfect, then I would not be in this material world, right? All of us are actually getting into this material world or into this birth, into this body with lots of baggage. If we don't address this, then we are just carrying the baggage along. But the moment we become intentional and we tell ourselves that, look, there's always a path towards improvement. There's always a path to letting go of these attachments. And that's what progression is all about. And that's the phase where we begin to progress in our spiritual journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing your mind. Yeah. And just continuing from what you are saying, many a times if we do not acknowledge this, then there's a high tendency that we will be expressing this grungy feeling about ourselves, this negative feeling of ourselves. But if we acknowledge and tell ourselves that, yes, this is where I am, but isn't it amazing that I'm going to be working towards improving myself, right? Okay. So we spoke about this. Now a question for all of you. Can you just take a time check?
Now it's 8:18.
8:18. Okay, wonderful. Right. Question for all of you. Do you think we as souls, we are alone, or is there another entity accompanying us?
As in guardian angels?
Okay, an example, guardian angel. Anyone else? Anyone else? We have 13 other participants here. Ellie, would you like to try? Ellie?
Hi.
Hi, Ellie.
I think essentially the soul is alone,
Okay.
but there are these guides and the gods
Okay.
and guide us, whether we want to take it or not. That's up to us. But I
Okay.
think essentially the soul, the journey, because it's your own karma, I think.
Yeah, it's your own journey. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So Ash and DK, thank you very much. You have answered the question. Essentially, we are not alone. All right. You may call the other entity the guardian angel, etc. But in Sanskrit, we are the Atma or the soul, and the guardian angel or the universe or God who accompanies every living entity is also called the Paramatma. Okay. So accompanying us is God, and therefore God is also there within this material body of mine. Okay, this is exactly what the scriptures is explaining. That God or the universe, right, or the higher order entity has expanded into each living entity. In fact, even into each atom. And therefore, He's the witness of everything. Okay? So, in this material body, I have my own individual spirit soul, and I also have the universe or the Paramatma represented in the body. Now, the choice is mine. If I engage continuously in material activity, being oblivious to the fact that God is also in my heart, God is also in someone else's heart, God is also in the heart of an animal, God is in the heart of every living entity. Right? So if I'm oblivious to it, I don't really care about this concept, then essentially what the universe or God or the higher order entity is doing is just an observer. But the moment we acknowledge that side by side to me is my ever well-wisher, who has always been there since time immemorial, since my previous births, right? He has always been there, or she has always been there, but I've never acknowledged his or her presence. Okay? So if I acknowledge the presence of the divinity within me, then I will get guidance. But if I do not acknowledge, then the divinity is just an observer to my activity. Then someone may ask, but divinity or God or the universe cannot be so, so biased, I thought divinity is supposed to be equal to all. What do you think, DK?
Yes, divinity is equal to all.
Okay. Then how will you explain this paradigm?
Which paradigm?
Essentially, when you look towards him, he provides you the guidance. But if you do not acknowledge his presence or her presence, then he's just an observer.
Oh, actually, I believe that even when we are unconscious or unaware, we are still being guided. But you're absolutely right. Until and unless we take that proactive step to acknowledge the existence of some supreme entity, that supreme intelligence, we are going to be in the shadows, and we're not really going to really prosper or thrive in life. We're not going to be able to make the wisest decisions for ourselves, such as responding instead of reacting. So I hope that answers.
Yes, wonderful, DK. Essentially, another paradigm which explains this, or another analogy which explains this is, if I put myself in a dark room with all the windows closed, all the doors closed, do I get the sunlight? I do not, right? The moment I open up the doors, the windows, that is where I can actually benefit from the sunlight. Similarly, the grace of divinity, all right, the benevolence of divinity or God or the supreme being is there for everyone, like the sunlight. But if we shut ourselves down and we don't acknowledge his presence and we don't open up, all right, as a receptacle to receive this mercy or this grace, then the fault is ours. The sunlight is there, the mercy is there, but if we do not have the intelligence to accept this, to grab this mercy, this grace, then the fault is ours. You see? So in that sense, right, divinity, God is equal to everyone, but if we do not know how to accept the grace, then it is not the fault of divinity. Okay. Any reflections on this point?
I'm actually Sikh by religion, and in our culture, in our religion, scriptures actually says you kind of need grace to receive grace. That it's quite a difficult concept. I think grace. Some might even ask for it, but may not get it. It's karmic apparently and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think it might be slightly more complicated, but I agree with you that we should, if we have the opportunity, ask for grace to be in our lives. It's very important. Yeah.
This is a complicated question, but it's a very important point which you are highlighting. Essentially, these sages, these sadhus, our parents, etc., right? It's with their mercy that sometimes, we are able to grow.
Yeah.
All right. So it's a very important point. And by the way, I grew up learning Sikhism too, and I can recite the Japji Sahib.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. That describes the entire universe. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So these concepts are all there in that scripture too. Right. So this is we will discuss this mercy, this grace in some of the future sessions.
Beautiful.
So let's continue. Right. So essentially, the soul is not alone. The supreme being.
I have a question.
Always.
Sorry.
Sure.
I have a question. How would a child know?
How will a child know this? Okay.
If you were born into a family or a situation where you were not guided by your parents, then how else can a child know about this?
That is why, as what DK says, you need that mercy in some way. You need that mercy. And in Sanskrit, the word is shukriti. Essentially, what it means is we must have done something in our past life which gives us this right to understand these concepts.
Yeah.
Right? It's the concept of shukriti. I would have covered this in future, but since this is an amazing question you have just asked, yes. So it is. Why is it that some souls are born in the most difficult part of the world, and all of us are born in affluent families in an amazing environment? Why? Right? It is because of how we have orchestrated our lives in our previous lives. Right? This is the whole concept of our karma, etc. And it's complicated, and it will take time for us to actually understand these concepts. In many of the Abrahamic religions, this concept of karma is not there, and therefore it's very difficult to explain why bad things happen to good people. Right? Apparently, I may be a good person, but still something devastating may happen to me. It's very, very hard to explain this. Right? But, in the scriptures, it actually explained, we are not, we are just not privy to what would have happened in our past lives. Okay, so let's move on. Right? So essentially, we are not human beings on a spiritual journey, but we are spiritual beings on a human journey. It could be that in our past lives, we were not spiritual beings on a human journey. We could have been spiritual beings on a, demigod demigod or a superhuman journey, or the journey of a cow, etc. Okay, so there's this concept of the Atman, which is essentially it is transmigrating from one body to another. This life, we are human beings, right? Very, very fortunate. The universe has provided us with everything. How we orchestrate our lives right now in this life is going to be revealing to us the body which we will get in our next life. All right. So, coming back to this concept of the soul, as I've explained earlier on, the soul is eternal, it's full of wisdom, it's just full of happiness, compassion, grace, etc. And the deepest happiness is essentially love, right? One of my colleagues, he went through a major crisis, right? He lost his son. The son was serving in the national service, and he was going through a really tough patch. And my advice to him was just go and serve the destitutes. Just go and serve people who are, the lesser fortunate ones. And then you will see how, just by expressing this service, this love, you will feel so much more fulfilled. And that's exactly what the scriptures are explaining. The deepest happiness is love, and that love which manifests through service, kindness, and compassion. Right? When we serve others, when we engage in compassion, kindness to others, right, it becomes so much more fulfilling to our heart. And that's where we can actually experience the greatest happiness. Okay, the greatest happiness is not in buying a 100-inch TV or in buying a bungalow. The greatest happiness comes from service, from kindness, compassion. Right, DK, you will, maybe be able to relate to this. Why do, maybe your parents, your grandparents, why do they go to the temples and keep on serving, cooking the langars, etc.? Why? Because through this service, it just fulfills us with the greatest happiness. Okay. Right. So when we are feeling down, when we are feeling depressed, to bring about a paradigm shift in this, all we need to do is just go out and serve. Just do some kind activities. Just express compassion to others, and you will feel that, wow, I'm able to really experience the actual qualities of my spirit soul. Okay? That is actually the best dopamine fix. And it's our biggest mistake to think that we are our body. And when that happens, we start to look for happiness outside instead of inside. And we lose touch of our true nature. Our true nature is we are a spirit soul. It's already consisting of qualities like happiness, compassion. But because we are connected to the external world, there's these negative emotions of anger, sadness, greed, confusion, and negative behaviors like fighting, cruelty, etc. We are not able to see this quality of the soul. The soul consists qualities such as joy, vitality, consciousness, clarity, radiance, warmth, compassion, love, gratitude, connection, confidence, balance, playfulness like a child, fulfillment, at the same time, assertiveness and power. But we're not able to see all these qualities because of the layers of mud which are covering our spirit soul. And this is coming not just from this life, but all our previous lives. Right? And it's through spirituality, it's through bhakti yoga that we can actually remove these layers. Okay. So this is a musk deer, and it's from the it lives in the Himalayas. Essentially, when there's a gush of wind, what the musk deer will do is it just goes berserk, because the wind brings this amazing aroma, all right, this amazing musk aroma. And this musk deer just keeps on running and running, searching for the source of this aroma. Little does it know that actually this musk aroma is coming from one of its own glands. All right, it's coming internally from its own body. So it's an amazing analogy, because we are searching for happiness in external things. And we neglect the spiritual happiness which lies really deep within us. And for us to actually bring about a realization of this spiritual happiness, we need to engage in spiritual activities. Material happiness can be brought about by material things. But if you want deep, eternal, spiritual happiness, that can only be brought about by spiritual activities. Okay, right? So once again, the deepest happiness is love, and it's manifest through service, kindness, and compassion. At the end of today's class, if you forget everything, just remember this particular sentence, which is the deepest happiness is essentially love, and it's manifested through service, kindness, and compassion. Okay, so tomorrow when you are driving to work, when someone tries to cut you, right, just be kind enough to allow them the right of way. Okay, just be compassionate. There must be a why behind their behavior, right? You know, the moment we start taking a step back, right, and focusing on wanting to respond, maybe what can actually assist us is to understand what's the why behind this person's behavior? Why is it triggering me? All right, or why is this person behaving in this particular manner? There must be a deeper reason to it. The moment we start understanding or asking ourselves, what is the deeper reason behind someone's behavior? That is where you are actually expressing compassion to that person. Okay, all right. So I'll take a stop here and see if you have any questions.
I had one question.
Yes, Pratul.
So, for me personally, I have a somewhat good, I wouldn't say I'm very, I have a decent understanding of how meditation benefits. But when I want to recommend it for someone else, one point that people bring up is that, I mean, there are different types of meditation. So personally, I know that mantra meditation is an easy and an effective method. But if I want to recommend meditation for someone, sometimes the point they bring up is that not all meditation is effective, and for some people, meditation it makes it worse in the sense that they have a very chaotic mind. So when they try to sit down with themselves, that this thing, and if they meditate, it makes them more irritable in a sense. So, what is the right prescription for meditation? Apart from, I mean, again, personally, I believe in mantra meditation, but is there any other guideline to it?
Maybe Hui, I'll just attempt to answer, and then just help me out, right? So, the understanding in today's world is that meditation is about voidism, right? You just get into a meditation, you don't think of anything, etc. But our mind, right? Our mind is chanchala. It's so hard to control the mind. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained, right, by Arjuna to Krishna that, Krishna, you're asking me to meditate, but it's so difficult. I'm a warrior. It's easier for me to control the wind than to control the mind. The moment you ask yourselves that, I'm just going to be sitting down and just meditating on the void, it's going to be really difficult. But the moment you start infusing it with sound vibrations, okay, with visualization, then your mind is getting focused on the sound, the hearing of the sound, and the visualization of, whatever you would like to have. So DK, since you are from the Sikh, you're a Sikh, right? Nitnam or Kirtan is exactly doing that, right? Where, the practitioners in Sikhism, they keep on meditating on the Lord's name. They keep on reciting the Lord's name again and again and again, right? Or the Mool Mantra, etc. Okay, Hui, over to you.
I mean, sound vibration is very, very helpful. But I feel sometimes if their mind is even so crazily like a crazy monkey that, even sound vibration is a little bit far-fetched for them, then I would say movements, which then yoga, exercise come in play, simple movement. Even if running, and just focus on your breath, go out for a run, but focus on your breath, just breathe in and out when you're panting and running. That could also be a kind of release for them. And then once their mind gets a bit more settled, then they can attempt to go for sound vibration. So it might be like part 1, then part 2.
Okay, thanks for sharing. So I guess in summary, I could see it as the prescription could be meditation with knowledge of the direction. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there are other practices like, mindful walking, getting to, a forest or a park, right? Being mindful, so while you are walking, you are actually being totally observant on what's actually around you and not just mindlessly walking. Even simple practices like when I'm eating, I'm mindful about the present. I'm mindful about what I'm actually eating and not just going with the flow. Namita.
You exactly have said what I wanted to share, that meditation should not be just thought of as a thing where you sit on a mat and close your eyes and you're looking at an object. And so meditation can be in your day-to-day small things that you do every day, like how you said, meditative walking. Every footstep that you take, you put your left foot ahead and then you put your right foot ahead. I mean, small things like that. I mean, walking in the park or, while sipping your cup of tea in the morning, the first cup of tea or the cup of warm water that you have, pausing before everything that you do could be you could be in a meditative state. So it doesn't really have to be in an allocated time space in a set space. You could be in your bus, closing your eyes and just watching your breath. I mean, that could be a meditative practice for you. So it depends what works for you, but it can be applied in your daily rituals from time to time. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, just add one more element, right? For example, when you are having your lunch or your dinner, and mindful eating also involves expressing gratitude to the universe for having provided you this meal. Mindful walking, it's also about, expressing gratitude to the universe for providing these trees who are actually, sustaining the levels of oxygen on this earth, right? So the more we are able to express gratitude, the better it is going to be for us. And then, we can move on to phase number 2, phase number 3, etc. Yeah. In fact, there was a point in time when my spiritual practice involved what we had taught earlier on, which was deep breathing. And then when I was exhaling, I would, recite the mantras, right? And at the same time, I would visualize on the divine form of the Lord, right? So I was like able to do 3-4 things at the same time. And I tell you, it just assisted me in a big way. Right? Okay. Any other questions, reflections? Alexis, Dawn, Coming, Ash,
We can stop
Shivani?
the recording for reflection.
Pardon, we?
We could stop the recording for reflection.
Oh, okay, sure.
I have a question.
Okay.
Regarding the part where you said that besides the soul, there's the higher being that is inside of us too, right? Together with the soul. So you're saying like if the higher being is regarded as residing outside of our body, is considered an observer, right?
No, the higher entity or the divine is within our body also. So we have got the individual soul, which is myself, Atma, and the divine entity side by side.
So just now what I'm understanding is if a person does not acknowledge or recognize or does not acknowledge or accept that this divine entity is within us, we do not receive it.
So then the divine entity is just an observer, right? And our karma essentially would have a huge impetus on us, number one. And the divine has also provided us that independence to make decisions. But the moment we acknowledge the presence of the Lord and we are wanting to receive the grace, the benevolence, and the mercy of the Lord, then there's a high probability that the divine would actually be also guiding us towards us going back to him or her.
Yeah, but why can't the divine? I mean, I can still I'm just thinking like a person or a soul who is actually still recognizing or how should I say, accepting that there's the existence of the divine that is not within his body, but yet he is receiving it as an external source. For example, like me, I'm receiving the guidance from you. So
very good
that
question.
also works, right?
Dawn,
and
yes,
how do I know
works.
whether is it in me? And then how do I know it's only if I recognize that it's in me, then I will be ready to receive it.
Okay. Excellent question. Again, this is another higher order stuff which we will cover in future. But essentially, divinity can be seen from 3 different angles. All right. What does it mean? Divinity as a person, okay, a spiritual entity, a person, the energy which is emanating from the divinity's body, that's the second form. All right. So there are many religions who believe in the energy, right? And at the end of life, they want to be merging into this energy. Okay. So the first one is the divine form of the Lord, God, then the energy which is emanating from the body of God. And the third representation of God is actually as Paramatma, or the super soul in every living entity. It doesn't matter how you want to approach him. You want to approach him as a person in the spiritual world, or you want to approach him as the energy emanating from him or her, or you want to be approaching him as the person who is so close to me in my heart. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
right? So these are like the three ways to the Lord is actually present in His energy, in His divine form, and as His expansion in every living entity. So it's your sukha, your way, how you want to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to actually add. Okay, let's see what DK, you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just have to caveat something now. I am actually pretty advanced in this stuff, so I really don't want to seem like I am overstepping the teachers here, but I just want to share that. But actually, thank you. I just want to share that we're entering the Aquarian age now. Previously we were in Piscean, and the Aquarian age is basically the transformative phase of the Kali Yuga that we are currently been experiencing for a millennia or more. And this just means that we will have more access to that divinity more directly. Like we would not have to go through another person or another institution or something, for example, to get information. But we will have to remember these ancient streams, like what PK has shared. The Vedic knowledge is actually a very ancient stream of knowledge. It's validated, verified for so many ages and centuries and stuff. So we have probably learned it in a previous lifetime. We are here just to get triggered, to get remembered, remember this, that we can start internalizing these practices more quickly. But it's just going to accelerate now. Like in the Aquarian age, like even the children that are going to be born or are already born, they are going to be way more enlightened than we are. And they're going to have more access to their spiritual abilities. I mean, we all have them. So yeah, it's going to be a cool phase. A lot of things, like I'm in sustainability, and I've already seen so much of momentum just gone. I mean, like so much momentum around like sustainability in the corporate sector, in nonprofits, like everywhere, everyone's talking about it. So yeah, this is what the effects of the Aquarian age is. And we're in very good times, very transformative times. Yeah.
Okay. So
the Aquarian word representing, oh yeah, it's really, the astrologies, Aquarius, Pisces, Cancerian. So apparently every few thousand years they are categorized by a certain astrological sign. And Aquarian just means that I think Aquarius, I'm not very familiar with the Western astrology, but it represents like, I guess, knowledge or leadership or something. So yeah, I just know that we will be more aware of our intelligence and the divinity streams of information, like our guardian angels, everyone, like we're just going to be a lot more connected out. So if you find yourself just very intuitively going into things, doing more spiritual stuff, that's just you being guided by the divine intelligence, and it's just going to pick up. It's just going to accelerate. A lot of us are already awakening to this, and yeah, it's going to be massive. Once we awaken, then we're going to start having more new world solutions, and we're going to actually start solving a lot of our pollution and problems that we have caused through our activities. So yeah, just question, yeah. Still, oh.
Sorry, DK, there's another point of view on this. We can actually share, but in the interest of time, maybe we'll cover it in another class.
Sure.
Why, it's essentially coming back to your point, why is it that the mercy is so much greater right now compared to the previous times? Because this is a degraded age.
Yeah.
All right. In the previous ages, it was possible to get into deep meditation, to get into different types of spiritual practices. But in Kali Yuga, the Lord has made it so simple. All you need to do is just chant His names, right?
Yeah.
To approach Him, right? So we will cover some of this in future classes.
Cool.
Okay. We had a question earlier on. Shivani, was that you?
Yeah, Shivani posted something about karma.
Shivani, would you like to unmute yourself and maybe ask the question? Or if it's not possible, then I'll just read it. Yeah. Let's see.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I was just curious that, um, like, because there's so much suffering in the world, and a lot of people go through a lot more suffering than others,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to believe that it's due to karma alone, because they are, I don't think that some people have accumulated a lot of bad karma, and then is suffering really a result of karma alone? Is there other factors which go into it? Yeah.
Um, it's a full class on this. Can we keep this for the future class?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Hui, any last points?
No, see all of you next week. More to
Okay.
come, more to come.
Yeah, yeah. These are just like the first few episodes of the real philosophy. Ali, so nice to see you again. Thanks for coming over last week.
Yes, thanks for having me. Enjoyed
All
that
right.
very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Looking forward
you.
to meeting all of
Thank
you.
you.
All
Good
right.
night.
Bye-bye.
You.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye,
We'll
Dawn.
see you next week.
Good night.
Okay.